Hey everybody, and welcome to another How to Win series for Arkham Horror the card game, where we are trying to help you win more. We have a bunch of videos in this series, and we are going to start talking about mulligans. Why you should mulligan, why mulligans are important, and tips to get better at mulliganing. Because when you're just starting out, it might be overwhelming. You might not know what you're looking for, and sometimes you might even just keep a hand because you don't want to think about what to mulligan. You don't know what you're looking for? We're going to help you figure out what that is. So, the first and most important question is, why do you mulligan? Before we get to that though, one thing to say to really put forward why you should be mulliganing in this game is because of all of the card games I've played, Arkham Horror has the most generous mulligan system there is. It's like a gift. And you should take advantage of it to ensure that you have the best chance of winning. So, why do we mulligan? We mulligan because having a better opening hand is an easy way to get ahead on tempo. If you are playing with a hand that is slow or requires a lot of time to get set up, and then that setup isn't like the best your deck can be, you're going to have a worse time playing the game. In addition, if you require, this is exactly what I was saying, if you require less actions to get set up, you get to operate more efficiently for a larger portion of the game. An example to this that we had included here was stick to the plan. And Travis, I want you to, I'll let you take this one for how this is relevant to mulliganing.
Yeah, part of the reason stick to the plan is so good is because you get to search your deck for up to 3 different tactics and supply events and put them under the stick to plan at the start of the game. And then you can play one of them per turn as though we're in your hand, basically. And it's like you just get to pick which 3 cards are under stick to the plan. So it's like you get to have 3 additional cards in your opening hand that are exactly what you want. And while they may not be exactly what you need to start the game with, like for example, if you're playing stick to the plan, probably Guardian, probably fighting. Ideally, you'd like to start every game with some kind of weapon, which stick to the plan can't pull out itself, but it can find prepared for the worst, which you can just put under stick to plan and then play it to find your weapon. Other things you might be looking for, you're going to need money to play that weapon, potentially. Or your other assets. Stick to the plan also finds that. Yeah, it's just a good way to guarantee that your opening hand is what you want it to be.
Yeah. And that's also like going back to this, why do you mulligan? Because stick to the plan is an example of a card that ensures you get your opening hand to what you want it to be. But even without stick to the plan, you want to mulligan because you want to get the best hand possible before you start playing the game. So, mulligan for cards that let you do your job. This is the easy first place to start when it comes to mulliganing. So if you're a fighter, you're going to want to look for weapons. If you're a clue gatherer, you're going to want to look for probably book boosters or things that can help you expedite your clue getting process. And then if you're a generalist, you want option to shore up both. It's less straightforward for mulliganing, but it's still kind of the plan of how can I do my job. And for generalists, you want to be able to do both. So you're kind of looking for pieces for both. Some examples we have here for the weapon for fighters. If machete's in your deck and you have a machete in your opening hand, congratulations, you've done it. If you don't, you might want to consider what cards would I have in my hand that I'd rather be machete, or rather, what cards in my hand don't help me get machete and should they be replaced in an attempt to get machete. Likewise for magnifying glass and rite of seeking and shriveling for those guys. Anything you guys want to add here, or should I move on?
No, I'm good to move on.
Sick. All right. This is a very important piece of knowledge. If you think that your hand is good enough, that means it can be better. When I look at my opening hand, if there's a card that I think this is fine, that is probably a sign that I should burn it. I should put it to the side and try to draw something better. If I didn't draw something better, I probably still drew something that was just fine because I'm not putting bad cards in my deck. So the thing is, a fine card can be replaced with a fine card, but a fine card can also be replaced with a better card. right? So good enough doesn't mean your hand is the best that it can be. We're gonna talk. Oh, sorry. Someone said something.
Sorry. Sometimes good enough is also like exactly that, though. Like the mulligan could theoretically make your hand worse, just because the weapon in your hand isn't the best one in your deck.
Mm-hmm.
It might still be worth keeping it, because if you replaced it, it might not be a card that does the same job. You know?
Yeah, and I think that's going back to the previous slide for weapons for fighters. If you have a weapon, that is your function. Like, you can find your better weapon later, but if you mulligan away that weapon, you can end up with nothing, right? So that's where your function is what's important. Hard mulligan. What is a hard mulligan? So a hard mulligan is the idea of being willing to mulligan every card in your hand in an effort to find a particular card. This is most commonly seen in builds of decks that are put around a specific card, like, for example, Dark Horse and Chuck Fergus. If you're playing a Dark Horse deck and you really need Dark Horse to function, or likewise, if you really need Chuck Fergus to be able to take advantage of all your expensive tactic or trick events, you're going to want to get rid of everything in an attempt to draw a Chuck Fergus with this example. There are times, of course, where there's a hard mulligan is still like you can keep one card and burn 4, but like a true hard mulligan is getting rid of everything in an attempt to find what you need. And if your deck needs those things, go digging for those things, because there's a bigger chance, well, there's a chance that the Chuck could be in the top 10, as opposed to just being like, I can get my way to Chuck in the future. Another important part of mulligans is looking for high XP cards. Experience isn't worth anything if you never see the card you invested in. So this is another part that, like, going back to the thing where the hand is good enough. Like, say you have your function, you have a magnifying glass, you have a few other things, but you have like some event or skill like that you don't really need right now. You don't need it at the start of the game, or it's an event or something that like has a bigger impact later in the game. If you don't have your high XP card in your hand, just get rid of that card that doesn't have an impact now, because there's a chance you can draw something that has an impact now for your mulligan, and then later in the game, you can draw the card that has an impact later. We're going to see this in some example mulligans that we're going to do at the end of this video, which actually should be coming up right away.
Yeah, to me, the best example of cards that fit that description of maybe mulligan this and hope that you find one of your really good cards are effects like Vicious Blow or Deduction.
Yes. Yeah.
It doesn't matter what stage of the game you find them in, they're going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
And they will be that same good as they would have been if you had them on turn 1.
Heck yeah.
As opposed to something like the Prophesy Profana or the Cyclopean Hammer shown here. Mm-hmm. Those are much better if you have them on turn 1. As opposed to finding them, maybe with 2 or 3 turns to go.
Yeah. Heck yeah. And then setup cards. These are another things you want to be looking for in your mulligan, which is you also look for cards that allow you to look at a large amount of your deck in a timely fashion. So this includes stuff like Arcane Initiate, Backpacks, and Prepared for the Worst. Travis, why are these important?
They're good because when you get to look at when you're looking for a specific card, it's better to look at multiple cards to try and find that than to just like draw a bunch of cards. Generally, you're looking for quality over quantity. Like Prepared for the Worst lets you spend 1 action. You still only get 1 card for it, but you get to look at 9 cards and pick from among those 9 cards. Whereas, like, you would have to actually spend 9 actions to see all those cards normally.
Yeah. Another thing, like with Prepared for the Worst, if I have Prepared for the Worst or Backpack in my deck, and I have like that and 4 other cards in my hand, but I don't have my weapon, I'm going to keep Prepared for the Worst in my hand and then get rid of the other things in a hope to find a weapon. And then if I grab my weapon, I'm not thinking, oh dang, now my Prepared for the Worst does nothing. My Prepared for the Worst is basically just consistency to ensure that I have the weapon I want when I want it. All right, I think that's it. So we can now go to some Let's Mulligan. We have 3 examples here. And I think this is actually going to be kind of fun because I think even within us three, we would have different mulligan plans for these. So I think we can just talk through it. We have one for Harvey, one for Nathaniel Cho, and one for Stella Clark using the starter decks that exist with them. Travis, I'll throw this one to you first because you're a resident Seeker expert. What's your thought process when you see this hand?
Well, looking at it, Harvey's base deck wants you to play a hand size sort of game, which we do want to get there. Looking at this hand, I probably keep the Arcane Enlightenment. I like that one because it's an enabler for the hand size thing, and it gives us a hand slot for our tome assets. Good card to have. I probably also keep the Preposterous Sketches, because it's 2 money, draw 4 cards with Harvey's ability.
Okay.
There's going to be clues on your location. There's going to be plenty of clues at the start of the game, probably. So, we don't have any way to really abuse the deduction.
Mm-hmm.
So I would, I consider keeping that. The Burning the Midnight Oil and the Feed the Mine are both definitely going back, though. We don't need the money from Burning the Midnight Oil for anything in particular right now. We've got enough money to play both Arcane Enlightenments and our Preposterous Sketches. And I guess, like, we're really, like, looking for assets that kind of help us get going early in the game. The only other things we'd be looking for, like Soleno Fragments or Wit and Green. Yeah, I'd probably throw the deduction back too. So I'd keep the Sketches and the Enlightenment.
What about you, Bryn?
I would probably have shipped not the Sketches or the Midnight Oil, but I think I would lose everything else.
Mm-hmm.
I don't actually know what's in the starter decks, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and assume that the that are like maybe Laboratory Assistants, Arcane Enlightenments, and Harvey's Signature.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose that does make the Arcane Enlightenment. But I would expect if you were playing a hand size deck that you'd have copies of that type of effect. So you're probably just gonna find them.
Mm-hmm.
It might as well be a chance to find the Vault of Knowledge, because that card is a hell of a drug.
That's pretty sweet.
Like, it's real good. And the Burning the Midnight Oil just pays for the Preposterous Sketches.
Yep.
Which turns into 4 different cards.
Yeah. When I looked at this last night when I was making this, my mind was no matter what, I'm keeping the Sketches, because if it's 4 cards. It's hard to say no to 4 cards. There's probably going to be a clue in my location for this scenario. And looking at it a bit further, I'd also probably keep the Burning the Midnight Oils because I like those cards early, and also with my play style, even if I was going to play assets, just like getting set up and going immediately is very important to me, and I always like to investigate on my first turn. Of course, this always will change what I draw from my Preposterous Sketches, but I'd probably keep those 2 for sure, and then I would not keep Feed the Mind. That's something that I can draw later or commit to a book test, no problem. Deduction I wouldn't keep because, as Bryn said, they're good no matter what when you draw them. And if I knew more about the... I'd probably ship the Arcane Enlightenment too. I'd probably be looking for a Soleno Fragment. I'd probably dig very hard for that and keep the other 2. Cool. You at home, what would you guys have done with this? You can let us know in the comments. I am curious, because mulliganing it really comes down to also the person playing, and then also, like, of course, your deck. We're using the starter decks here as an example, but, like, it really changes also, like, what's in the construct of your deck. But I think looking at a hand and, like, discussing it out loud is very important to understanding how to get better at mulliganing. Next up here, we got Nathaniel Cho. Bryn, I'll throw this one to you first for this mulligan.
So Relentless is like... Helen's a freebie.
It's economy, Bryn.
This card sucks.
It's economy, Bryn.
Yeah, like, normally I would... Like, you shouldn't mulligan your economy if you have an expensive deck, and we can see a Greta Wagner, so, like, we got an expensive deck.
Mm-hmm.
But Relentless is not good economy, and it doesn't show up in a timely fashion. So we could probably ignore that. As for the rest, I would keep the Greta, but the other cards are not boxing gloves.
Mm-hmm.
And playing Nathaniel Cho with boxing gloves is a whole different beast to playing him without them.
Yeah.
So I would throw away the rest of it. Like, I would keep the Greta, because even if you have to start the game fighting at 6 without any effect, fine, we can make that work. But if we find the boxing gloves, then we're in great shape.
Yeah. Travis, I'm just curious. Before I'm gonna give my answer next, but did you choose these, or did you just like you didn't like you chose these, right?
Yeah.
Because in my mind, I
picked them.
pictured you building the deck, shuffling up, drawing a hand, and being like, "Here we go."
Pull all the cards out of my
Yeah, out your
binder to
binder,
rebuild
build
it
the
instead
sleeve
of
the decks up.
yeah. They're comfortable to shuffle, of course.
Yeah. So for me, for this one, Relentless is economy, but I'm not. I'd rather find to clean them out for my economy to get this going. Greta is very expensive, and you, as Bryn was saying, I need the boxing gloves with Nathaniel Cho. Part of me even feels like I would do a full hard mulligan for the boxing gloves here. If I don't find the boxing gloves, I can also find Randall Cho, which in turn will get me my boxing gloves. So I probably would do a full 5. However, Greta, very good card. She makes me want to keep her. But and then also, I kind of like Monster Slayer here too, because there's nothing worse than like being the fighter and like being like shrug. I have nothing to do. So like part of that card is also kind of sticking with me a bit. But I think I would do a full 5 to try to get Randall or my gloves. What about you, Travis?
Yeah, I would ship everything to try and find the boxing gloves. I'm a little bit less concerned about keeping the Greta than Bryn is, because she costs 5, and I would rather rely on the events that I'm gonna potentially find for that X to bridge the gap to getting the boxing gloves. And if I keep Greta, then I either am spending all my money on her or spending it on the events, and then half my hand, well, some cards in my hand don't do anything. So, yeah, I would ship everything and try and find boxing gloves or Randall.
Sick. All right, one last example left. We got Stella Clark. So in this hand, we got Take Heart, Will to Survive, Scrapper, Granny, and Rabbit's Foot. So I'll start with this one because I am the resident survivor here. I would keep Take Heart because it's nice. I get an extra action when I fail a test. So I'm going to be looking at bombing a test immediately after playing the Rabbit's Foot, which I'm also keeping. And Granny Orn's like the relevant ally, so I'd keep her too. And then I'd get rid of the Scrapper and the Will to Survive. Will to Survive is that perfect example of a card you see in your opening hand that you want later in the scenario, not at the beginning. So that's one that you're going to draw later. And like there is also like a case for Scrapper, but not for like, that's like when I draw it later. I'm not like worried about that on my opening turn. But like this is perfect. Opening hand, you play Rabbit, Granny Orn, take a test, you spend all your resources, you get the take card, get 2 cards and 2 resources back. Seems like a good first turn. That's mine. What about you, Travis?
I'd probably keep the Rabbit's Foot and the Take Heart, and whether I ship the Granny or not would depend a little bit on like who I am playing with and what needs to get done.
That's fair.
Like, if I don't need to do things early in the game, I don't have an issue keeping her. Like, she's the ally that you want. But also, there's only mulligan 2 cards. I mean, you have the card draw from the tarot card and the Rabbit's Foot, but you just don't do anything. You know? Cell stats aren't great, and they'd like to have one of the gun, whatever it's called, or the lock picks to kind of, or the key ring, sorry, to kind of participate.
What about you, Bryn?
Yeah, like I'm definitely mulliganing the. I cannot imagine a possible first turn that I'm gonna need that, or even first 3 turns. Honestly, Like, it's very costly, but powerful. That's kind of whether I want to keep, like, I want to keep either the Scrapper, Granny, depending on what my team looks like. If I'm going to find myself running away from monsters because maybe we don't kill them so good, then I definitely want to keep the Scrapper. But otherwise, I think it's the Granny Orn most of the time. And yeah, Rabbit's Foot. The only reason to mulligan Rabbit's Foot is because there are two of them.
Yeah.
Because like, it's just you're gonna see more cards with it.
Yeah, I suppose we never said that, but if you have like two of item where you only have one slot, you can easily mulligan that one away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it changes drastically if I have a Relic Hunter. I definitely want two Rabbit's Feet in play if I've got a Relic Hunter.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, assuming our team is the two decks we saw before, I'd probably keep the Granny or the Rabbit's Foot. And, like, it's tough to mulligan Take Heart because, again, Take Heart is just, you get to see more cards than you would if you mulliganed it.
Yeah. Sick. Likewise to the Harvey Walters and the Nathaniel Cho deck, we'd love to know, for you guys watching at home, what you guys would mulligan, what you would keep here. Because, as I said, even in this, our group of three, we have some differences in all this, which is cool. And also why, like, mulliganing, there's like a baseline, but there's no, like, mulligan this way, right? Like, it really comes down to your play style and then your team composition, the scenario, everything for it. But these little hints are what helps you understand mulliganing more, and hopefully that video has helped you kind of get that a bit. If any other topics you want us to cover in this series, please let us know in the comments. I'm always looking for more. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. And as always, GG's.